In this video, I want to talk a little bit about engraving pictures on slate. I'm kind of new to this part of the laser engraving world, so I went out and investigated several different techniques, and I thought I'd just take a couple minutes and share with you what I learned. Here's an example of a picture that I was working on. Just wanted to test it out on slate, along with some pictures that a friend of mine sent me that we are thinking about engraving on slate coasters and charcuterie boards and stuff for his Etsy shop. I wanted to go through and try to determine the best process for engraving these types of images. You'll notice in this image there's some blemishes on my nose where little acne or whatever it is, it was bugging my face at the time, and I needed to take care of that. I didn't want that on the slate. I wanted a better picture than that. And I needed to interpret this information so that it went on the slate well. In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the steps that I took to try to get good engravings on slate. And I'll go through the steps of the process, and maybe you can use these and get better results than you have in the past. Or if you have ideas of other things I should try, let me know. One of the biggest challenges I've always had when trying to determine how to engrave on slate, I'm talking about images, not just regular text, is whether to put a pre-coat on it of some kind. And I've seen videos with all different kinds of pre-coats, anywhere from WD-40 to a special mix, to a lacquer, to shellac, to no pre-coat. In general, here's the steps. One is that you need to make sure that your slates are prepared properly. And in my case, I talk about a method of pre-coating the slate so that the image engraving comes through brighter and clearer. The next one is you have to process the image in a way that allows the slate to be engraved properly. And I've heard all sorts of things about that, about using different softwares, and the one I'm using in this video is ImagR. Not needing to use ImagR, just using Lightburn directly and so forth. And I'll share with you my results. Next then is setting up the Lightburn software with the right burn settings, I'll call it, for creating the best results from your images. So I experimented with a couple different settings on my slate with my laser. I'm sure yours will be different, and I'll talk a little bit about how to test that to determine the best settings. I won't go into a lot of detail, but I will go over quickly what you should be looking for. Wait a second, what's with the sanding? Well, let me talk about that for a minute. I was actually using some used slate coasters that I couldn't engrave on, or I thought I needed to throw away, and I found a way where I could reuse those coasters. So I'm just including that as some extra information in this video. Did you know that you can use slate coasters if you sand off the original engravings first and then spray paint them black? First we'll sand them, and then we'll actually wash them, and then we'll paint them black. Whether I'm reusing slate coasters or using them for the first time, it can't hurt to sand them a little bit to make them a little smoother. But that's not a necessary step, that's an option. I did find painting my coasters black, which was recommended in one or two videos I did my research on, did help with the engraving process, which I'll show you later. So the actual step is paint the coasters black. And if you feel like sanding them a little smoother, it may give you a little better surface to engrave on. But it's not as critical as painting the coaster black, which is what this step is about. Once you've painted the coaster black, it's important that you let it thoroughly dry before you actually start to engrave it. The next step is to process the image in software that will allow it to have the best results. Several people have mentioned using ImagR. In fact, the majority of people that have very nice images I've seen recommend this software, ImagR. Others will use Photoshop or some other kind of software. Others told me to just process them straight in Lightburn, and I tried both methods, and I found this to be the best. So here's a couple images that my colleague sent me that we wanted to put on coasters, along with that image of my grandson and I. So I started out with these images first. The first one we were going to go with is Dracula. So let me take this coaster bride and move her out of the way. and move Dracula out of the way. And this is the software we're going to use. I did purchase a license after trying it. You can try it for free. You don't have quite as many options when you try this. And I'm not going to get into a detailed instruction because I'm just touching the surface on this, but it did allow me to make some good images. So the first thing you need to do is upload your image. So I'm going to upload the image. I'm going to go pick it out of where I have it on my folders. And after I've loaded it, you can see I have the image sitting there on the screen. Next step is to crop if you feel like you need to. So in this case, I'm looking at a crop. I don't see any need to crop. You can either do it in pixels, inches, or millimeters, however you want to do it. If you want to round the corners a little bit, you can do that simply by pulling this, and you can see it rounded these corners. Hit crop. Now I've got the corners rounded. Next step is to resize, and this is critical. My Slate coasters are in inches, and that image I want to be about 3.75 inches square, and you see it kept them together, and I accidentally hit the down arrow as I was moving my mouse. DPI, that's set up for your machine and what you find works the best. I've found that for my machine, my CO2 laser is actually going to work best about 280. But at the time I did this, I had defaulted to 300, so I'll leave it where I did when I did this originally. Hit OK. Now that you've hit OK, you can see the picture that resulted. If you have the free version, you're not going to have all of these options over here. You only have 3 or 4 options. And in this case, I didn't find that I needed to use any of those. And this isn't a full lesson on ImagR because I'm nowhere near an expert. I'm just showing you how to get to the process. If you pay for it, it was a very reasonable price. I'll give you a link in the video description on where you can link over to pay for it. There's a pricing right up here. And so once you're at this point, you could do some adjustments to it, and I did to the picture of me and my grandson, but for this one I found no real need to do anything. Maybe I could adjust a little brightness or something, and you can see I did a little bit there. All right, and now that I have that, I'm ready to move on to the next step. So that's the resize, and the resize is critical because it gives you not only the height and width of it, but the DPI, or dots per inch, which is important for engraving. And then once you have that, if you wanted to add text, you could. But the next step is to determine what material you're going to be able to use. And because I paid for it, I have all of these selections. In reality, if you're using the free version, you're just going to have a couple selections up here. But the key is, let's just pick one for now. I'm going to pick Norton, and I'm going to pick black slate. So that's actually going to process my image to go on black slate. And I could do that under CO2, CO2, Martian. The video I watched, they like Martian, black slate, but I'm going to go with Norton black slate because that was the one that I found I liked the best. I'm going to hit OK. And now your image is processed, and you can see because it's going on slate, it's already been inverted. So that's important, it's already inverted, and you kind of look at it and say, well, is that really the effect I want? Well, what's really cool about this ImagR is I come over here to preview with material down here. I select that, and it tells me it's going on black slate. And you notice how it looks like black slate in the background? And this actually shows what your image is going to look like if your laser settings are set up right, which will be the next step, is actually going into the laser and setting those up. So this is what it will look like on your slate, which is pretty cool that you can see that. And I found that for the most part, this seems to be pretty accurate. The next step after you've checked that out and you've processed it for the right material is you go to download. And in download, with the version you pay for, you'll have this DPI test. If you do not have the version that you pay for, you will only have these 3 selections above here. Download BMP, download PNG, and download JPG. And the one that works best for my laser and the one that was recommended is download PNG. So I hit download PNG, and you can see up in the corner here, it's downloading that PNG. Once I've downloaded that PNG, I can use that in my laser software to burn the image. Now let me talk about this DPI test. What I should have originally done if I wasn't sure what the best settings were for my laser, do a DPI test. And what you do for a DPI test is you come over and you pick an area, and lots of times eyes are the most detailed, of your picture that you're trying to do. And what you're trying to do is figure out the right dots per inch for your laser. So to do that, you've got this area that you've picked out. You don't have this if you've got the free version. And then you can pick out the DPI values that you want to test. So I tested before 254, 282, 318, and 363, I think. Once I selected those, I hit download, and you can see up here in the corner that it's downloading DPI test. And I'll close this. So once everything's downloaded, at that point you exit this ImagR program and you go into Lightburn. I'm using a Mac computer to do this. And so these automatically went to my downloads folder out of ImagR. And here are the files that it sent to me. Each of these are an image by themselves with little notes down on the side. This says 254, this says 282, this would say 318. So those will be test images that you can load into your Lightburn software to determine what the best DPI is for your machine. What you see here is my Lightburn program screen, and you see a picture of a Dracula sitting in the center of it. And the way I got Dracula in the center of it was simply by importing the file that I had downloaded from ImagR. I'm going to go in reverse order than I should, but this is what I actually did because I got so anxious to try this thing that before I did the DPI test, I downloaded Dracula using a DPI that was given in a video I was watching to see how it works. And you're going to see that carve in just a second. Once you import the image into your Lightburn program, it's going to come in at the size you resized it to. And you'll notice in this case, mine came in at, and let me change this from millimeters to inches, at 3.5 inches. I wanted it 3.5 inches on the slate. And you can see that it's already inverted because it's going to be carving onto black slate. So it makes it kind of hard to see. Let's take a quick look at what this is going to carve like. I'm going to select it, and let me open that up so you have a nice big picture. It's hard to tell what it's going to look like, but if you hit invert, that'll give you a better preview, and you can see that looks pretty good. That's what I'm hoping to get from the carve on the black slate. So now that I know what I should get, I need to set the right power and speed settings. So that's where I'm going to go next. To select the power and speed, I go to the image and I start to make the adjustments in the cuts layer. I need to set the maximum speed, the max power, and the min power. I'm using these power levels based on previous slate that I've carved without an image and without being processed. So I first tried it with these settings. Knowing that the image is going to process between the max power and the min power, you want to adjust these to get the right power level, and you will see in my first carve, Dracula comes out a little bit light. So you're going to play with these settings, max power and min power. That is where your DPI test will come into play that I'll show you in a second. Notice that none of the rest of this is going to be left on here because I'm going to take and I'm going to select pass-through. That's important because if I don't select pass-through, Lightburn's going to try to process this image. So once I have that, I hit OK, and now my image is set up to be engraved on my laser. Let's take a quick look at how this turned out. So here's my first run. You can see the power is not as high as I need it to be, and so therefore I'm going to go ahead and run another pass with increased power. After one pass, this is what it looks like, a little bit light, so I either need to increase the power or decrease the speed. I think I'll increase the power, but not too much because it's a second pass. Okay, this is the second pass, and it looks like it's coming out much better. I could tell why this was carving that it was going to be much better and brighter. And this is the end result, and you can see it turned out much better. After the success with Dracula, I thought I would try Frankenstein's Bride here, and it was a couple differences, but the key thing was I upped the power, and the result was a washed out image, and you will see that right here. So it also proved the importance of using the DPI test, which I'll cover next. So the next step in my testing process was to do what I should have done to begin with, and that is to do a DPI test. When I was showing you ImagR, I showed you how you could output a DPI test. I decided to output 4 different images for this test. First, I output 254 DPI, 282 DPI, 318 DPI, and 363 DPI, and those were the DPIs I used for my testing. Then what I did was I applied different power levels to each of those DPIs. So what you see here is a grid of the same picture out of ImagR, the same DPI picture, just repeated in 3 rows. Each one I set up with the same speed setting, but I used a different power setting. In the first one, I used 25 to 10. Second one, I used 30 and 10. And in the third one, I used 35 and 10. And I went ahead and carved these to see which one I thought looked the best, which was 282, 30, and 10 power right here. And I carved my first Frankenstein. The result of that was he was a little overpowered. So then I went back and I used the 282 DPI and carved a second Frankenstein with a power level of 2510, and that looked better. So let's take a look at that. So what you see here going on with the laser is I'm engraving the first row of the test pattern. Apparently I lost the pictures of me engraving the next rows, although I didn't get a picture of me actually showing the engraving. I do have a picture of what the test looked like, at least a partial picture. Overall, this wasn't a bad test. I kind of liked how it turned out, but I thought it was a little bit overpowered. So I'm going to run a second test here that I'll show you with a little lower power. After running the test, I decided that I could go with either one of those. They both looked pretty good, but I did prefer the lower power, which was run at a power level of 25 and 10. The first one was run at a power level of 30 and 10. What do you think? So after running the test with the monsters on the charcuterie, I decided to run a real image test with my grandson and myself. I wanted to test out using black spray paint as the first step or just straight on the coaster. So in each case, I processed the image through ImagR. And in the first case, I used a lower power setting. And in the second case, I used a higher power setting to compare those two. And then I processed the image, the same image I was using with ImagR, without putting a black spray paint base. This is what it looked like if I looked at it in the preview mode. Really not too bad at all. So let's see how it looks. So let's take a look at these. The first one we're going to watch is a spray painted black base with the lower power setting. And then the second one we're going to see here is the black spray paint with the little bit higher setting. And then the last scene we're going to see here looking at this montage is a comparison of the three. I'm not going to show us actually carving the non-spray painted black one. I'm just going to show the results of that. With that said, let's look at the results right now. These are the results of the low power test with black spray paint. They look pretty good. This is test 2 where I increased the power to 30 with black spray paint. And this is the final one where I didn't put any black spray paint on it at all. After looking at all these results, the clear winner to me, well, I shouldn't say clear, but the winner to me is number 2, the higher power 30 max 10 min with the black spray paint. Number 1 was pretty good with the lower power, but not quite as popping. And the one without any black spray paint, although it turned out pretty good, and if I didn't know about black spray paint, might have thought it was acceptable, was a little too washed out compared to the others. So that's my opinion after looking at these, and I guess for this video, I'm interested in what you think in the comment section, but for me, I guess my opinion is what matters. Let's talk about what went on in this video. Well, that's a wrap for this video. I hope going through this process you picked up an item or two that may help you with your images if you're processing them on Slate or in any other manner. I actually found that by using ImagR, and although I didn't cover it in this video, I actually found that by using ImagR, my processing of those images worked better for my wood burnings too. And maybe I'll talk about that sometime. But the main thing I wanted to focus on was the slate. There were a couple of interesting things I thought I would include in here. One was that you could reuse slate. I hadn't known that. I'm going to actually put a link in the description of this video to the person that told me that, because that was a big tip for me that I hadn't heard about. So you might as well look at his video also if you want to get more details. It's very specific on what he does, and I kind of included that in a hurried up manner. The other thing that was nice to experiment with, and I did learn more, was that ImagR truly does make a difference in processing those images. I had gotten mixed reviews on that in the past, with some people telling me just process them in Lightburn, and finding out that I get much better results when I process them in ImagR. And then the other thing was the fact that the black spray paint really did make a difference. You'll notice I didn't include anything in here about processing or not using ImagR, because I had already concluded, and I didn't want to take more time in the video to show that it was much easier processing through ImagR than trying to process them in Lightburn. If you liked what you saw or picked up a thing or two, please give me a like. If you would like more information on what I'm doing with my laser, say so in the comments section. And if you want to be informed of future videos when they come out, please subscribe to my channel. With that, I hope you have a great day, and I hope you learned a thing or two. I know that I did in making the video. Take care of yourself. Goodbye.